Good afternoon, everybody. Well, it's a great honor to be speaking here at the second Raisina dialogue, and absolutely fantastic to be back in India. You're absolutely right. I have been here several times on several official trips, and also to a number of family weddings where I've learned over the years to do my special, light bulb, motorbike dance and dress up in all the proper gear. Unlike anybody else, like most other people tend to be wearing suits, I find, when I go into the receptions. And when we arrive in Delhi or in Mumbai to meet the rest of Marina's family, we always remember to bring a particular thing, either from the plane or from duty free. Can you guess what it is? What? Black label is right. We tend to bring a bottle of whiskey. I don't know. I think the High Commissioner was a bit worried about whether I should bring this up in this august come. We tend to bring a bottle of whiskey to add to the astonishing 1.5 billion litres of whiskey that are consumed every year in this country. Now, why do we bring this bottle of Scotch to our relatives in Mumbai and Delhi? Actually, I just got some on the plane called Green Label, which I'd never heard of before. I certainly hope it isn't creme de menthe. Anyway, the reason we bring it, of course, is that there is a tariff in India, I'm embarrassed to relate, of 150% on whiskey. And I think this matters, and I'm going to explain why. I have no particular desire to attack Indian whiskey tariffs today, but I think the time has come to stick up for free trade and to make the case again for the immense benefits of a globalized economy where we learn from each other and trade freely with each other. And that case needs setting out here now, today. And I think perhaps I am qualified to do that because I belong to a select group of people who are not necessarily always approved of by what you might call the global liberal elites. And in the pages of good left-wing newspapers in my own capital, in London, I am denounced as what? A populist. I'm denounced because I was involved, I can't hide it from you, I was involved in a movement opposed to what I see as the undemocratic nature of the European Union, and we were successful. And so I find myself bracketed, and I'm perfectly happy about it, I'm bracketed with various other figures around the world who are said to be populists, people who come to power on a sort of tide of pitchfork-wielding rebellion against the conceit of the ruling classes. And so it's not so much that I want to stick up for the populists. I think they can take care of themselves. Populists tend to have pretty thick skins. I want to stick up for the people who vote for them, because they aren't bad people, and they may feel worried about the security of the world or about terrorism, and they may feel that they aren't allowed to hold widespread opinions and that they are being sneered at or disapproved of. And they look at this great glittering globalized economy and they see some people getting very rich indeed, and they wonder why their own families aren't keeping pace. And they fear that they may be the first generation not to be overtaken in prosperity by their own children. And I don't think that these people should be dismissed or patronized, and they should be listened to. But nor should we draw the wrong conclusions about this wave of populism, which I believe we've been discussing at this conference. The answer is not to put up barriers or to weaken our trading systems. The answer is to use our international systems to give those people the jobs and the self-respect that they need, and to show how trade can work for both sides and how fair exchange benefits everyone and is not zero-sum. And the answer is for great nations such as India and Britain to tackle the concerns of our electorates together. And that means not going back to the 1930s with strong men in power everywhere, with autarkic and beggar-thy-neighbor policies of tariffs and other barriers to trade. You may remember Lord Copper of the Beast. Does anyone remember Lord Copper of the Beast, the newspaper magnate in Evelyn Waugh's satirical novel Scoop, which was published in, I think, 1936? Lord Copper personally briefs a young reporter about his world view and the coverage he wants to see. The policy of the Beast is for strong, mutually antagonistic governments everywhere, he says. Well, that isn't my policy, and I don't think it should be our policy. We believe still in multilateral cooperation, and we believe in the UK in NATO as the cornerstone of our defence, and we are one of the few countries in the alliance to meet the target of spending 2% of our GDP on our armed forces. We have shown our commitment to our collective security in sending a battalion to Estonia as part of NATO's enhanced forward presence. We support the UN in holding to account the regimes of such men as Bashar al-Assad. And by the way, we were the first P5 country to call for India to join the Security Council as a permanent member, as well as the Nuclear Suppliers Group. Like India, we in the UK know the threats of terrorism, and I can tell you that some of my wife's family were there in Mumbai in 2008 when those appalling attacks took place, and we're working already with India to tackle those threats with ever greater intelligence sharing. And we have, as you may know, in the UK, some of the most formidable intelligence capabilities in the world. We have no inhibitions in sharing our most advanced technology with India. Take the Hawk jet trainer. I saw a poster of one as I was coming in from the airport. I think it was the Indian aerobatic team seemed to be flying them. A world-beating aircraft designed and made in Bangalore by Hindustan Aeronautics in alliance with BAE Systems. And I know that my distinguished counterpart, who said he'd be sitting in the front row, but he seems to have vanished, Mr. Jaishankar, there he is. Mr. Jaishankar, I think he told you this morning, or so I read, that he thought Europe was in danger of shrinking and retreating in the world. I think that was the gist of what Mr. Jaishankar said. He doesn't seem to be contesting it. Well, I'm here to tell you today, in the nick of time, that that is not the UK's approach, not the UK's ambition. We have reach in the UK. We've just decided to restore our military presence east of Suez with a £3 billion commitment over 10 years, a new naval support facility in Bahrain. We have commitment to the wider world. The Royal Air Force has just sent Typhoon fighters to Japan and South Korea on Exercise Eastern Venture, showing Britain remains one of the handful of countries able to deploy air power 7,000 miles from home. And we have ambition. Our Strategic Defence and Security Review makes clear that the Royal Navy's new aircraft carriers will be present in Asian waters. The Five Powers Defence Arrangement, which joins Britain with Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand, remains the only permanent and multilateral defence pact in Asia. Twice a year, British forces exercise alongside our allies in Southeast Asia. And as our naval strength increases in the next 10 years, 2 colossal new aircraft carriers, as I say, we will be able to make a bigger contribution. In the Indian Ocean, we have a joint UK-US facility on Diego Garcia, an asset that is vital for our operations in the region. We're also a member of the UN command on the Korean Peninsula, while in Brunei we have a deployable garrison of British Gurkhas. And like India, we have our principles, we have a similar approach to the world. When it comes to the tensions in the South China Sea, we are in favor of the rules-based order. Now, Britain takes no position on the merits of the competing claims, but we do take a view on how they are pursued. We oppose the militarization of the South China Sea, and we urge all parties to respect freedom of navigation and settle their disputes peacefully in accordance with international law. We regard last year's ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague as binding on both China and the Philippines. Indeed, may I respectfully say to our Indian friends that we regard all such judgments by panels as binding. We believe India can be a great force for stability in this region, the keystone of a great natural arc created by the Indian Ocean and running from Perth in the east to Cape Town in the west. This is the vast hinterland in which India rightly seeks to influence events. And quite frankly, we support what Prime Minister Modi was saying yesterday in his ambition for India to rejoin the neighboring geographies. Imagine how wonderful it would be if the nations of South Asia, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, could break down the barriers of mistrust and make the most of the economic opportunities and potential. And that is why security matters. That's why it's so fundamental, because without trust between countries, without the freedom of the sea lanes, 25% of world trade going through the Straits of Malacca, without a rules-based international order, we will find ourselves reverting to the uncertainties of the 1930s, when trade declined. And we all know the consequences. We all know what happened. And trade, I'm afraid to say, trade as a share of global GDP is declining now for the first time since the 1990s. And that is partly why I'm so excited by the opportunities that the UK has today. Because as our Prime Minister, Theresa May, said yesterday, we believe that we can strike a new and healthy relationship with the European Union, supportive of the European Union. As I've said many times before, we want to be outside the main body of the cathedral, but supportive, like a flying buttress. This was unfortunately mistranslated in a recent conference I was at by somebody said the interpreter said we wanted to be a flying bucket. And the French were particularly, qu'est-ce qu'ils veulent les Anglais? C'est quoi un frying bucket? But we eventually explained to them that we wanted to be outside, but supportive, and that's what we can do. We want an arrangement based on free trade, but intergovernmental cooperation on all the things that matter to all of us. And for the first time in 44 years, we in the UK are going to be able to campaign across the world for free trade, not just because it is in Britain's interest, though it undoubtedly is, but because free trade has lifted billions of people out of poverty over the last 50 years and has been the single greatest engine of human progress. And that is because free trade and economic interpenetration are of massive mutual benefit. Of course, you look at India and Britain, it's a cliche, but it is true. We managed to achieve together what we might never manage to pull off individually. And I need hardly tell this audience that the single biggest employer in Britain is an Indian company which makes beautiful Jaguars in the West Midlands and then sells them back to India. You may have heard that the curry restaurants in Britain manage to employ more people than the shipbuilding, coal, mining and steel industries combined, which is not a totally flattering statistic, and may explain why some of us struggle with our waistlines in the UK. But I don't want you to think that we are all sitting in Britain munching poppadoms, because we are also out here too in huge numbers. There are 4 JCB factories here in India. We have British scientists teaming up with Indians to tackle the latest superbugs. 1 in 20 private sector jobs here in India is in a UK company. And our trade is growing, 3% a year. But I don't think it's good enough, and I hope you don't think either, because when you consider this is a country where there are 800 million people under the age of 35. You can see the scale of the opportunity. The population of Ireland is less than 5 million, and Britain somehow does more trade with Ireland than it does with the whole of India. Prime Minister Modi has set out a very exciting programme, £830 billion infrastructure investment plan. I want our UK engineers and surveyors and planners and consultants and architects and lawyers and bankers, I hope there's some bankers here today, step up to the plate. Take part in this incredible development and break down any barriers there may be to the participation of those British service industries in that great enterprise. And that is why I think the time is fast upon us, when we need to turbocharge this relationship with a new free trade deal, such as we will shortly be able to do. We can't negotiate it now, but we can sketch it out in pencil on the back of an envelope. And just to give you an idea of the type of thing that we could do, let us go back to the whiskey with which I began and with which some of you may be in need. It is an extraordinary fact that even though, I don't think anybody here is going to deny this, even though Scotland is incontestably the home, the origin, the progenitor of Scotch whisky, isn't it? The only place in the world where water trickles through the peaty glen in exactly the right way to turn it into liquid fire. And even though whisky is itself, as far as I know, according to Wikipedia, derived from a Gaelic word whisky, U-I-S-C-E, or possibly U-I-S-C-E-A-U-G-H, depending on how good your Gaelic is. Does anybody know what whisky-ach means, by the way? Anybody know? It means water, apparently, so they obviously drank a lot of it. Even though whisky is incontestably Scottish, the total share of Scotch whisky, the authentic whisky, in the Indian market, the biggest single market in the world for the consumption of premium whisky, the total share is something like 4%, netting the UK only £80 million in exports. Now imagine if we could just double that or treble that by removing those pesky tariffs of which I spoke earlier on. Giving the Indian consumer more money to spend on other things, a good thing. Double it to 8%. Think of the boost to morale of the Indian whiskey drinker, the boost to productivity to the Scottish industry, and then think how wonderful it would be if symmetrically we could have zero tariffs on fantastic Indian products such as those electric cars or buses or perhaps even bicycles that we're now seeing on the streets of London. This is not the time to put up barriers between our countries. This is the time to tear those barriers down. And I say to you, we may be leaving the EU, we may be taking back control of our borders, but my Indian friends, I say to you, that does not mean we want to haul up the drawbridge. We do not want to deter Indian talent from our country. And I'm proud to say that the UK economy is the single, not just the most dynamic, the fastest growing in Europe, but the most diverse on earth. We have the biggest tech sector anywhere in our hemisphere. FinTech, EdTech, MedTech, GreenTech, Biotech, NedTech, Nanotech, we've got it. Tech, we've got it. We have the biggest banking sector, indeed 40% of all foreign exchange transactions take place in London. More dollars are bought and sold in London than they are in New York. We have the most visited museums in the world. I think the British Museum alone receives more tourists than some European countries I could name, but I won't because of my famed diplomatic finesse. We have the best universities in the world. I hope it's not too chauvinistic to point out that we have the best university in the world. Cambridge alone has produced more Nobel Prize winners than every university in China and Russia added together and multiplied by 2. I hope I haven't offended any of the countries I've mentioned. Of the kings, queens, presidents, and prime ministers of the world, an astonishing 1 in 7 was educated in Britain. And that is a ratio we mean to keep, and we are going to keep, because I can tell you we have more Chinese students studying in London alone than there are in any other city in the world, outside China, obviously, where they have a lot of Chinese students. And our numbers of Indian students, by the way, because I know this is a hot topic, our numbers of Indian students are increasing again. I'm looking at the High Commissioner who's looking back approvingly as I make this point. And that is because we welcome talent. We welcome talent in our city and in our country. And it's by being open and by breaking down barriers that we will, in the long term, create the jobs, the good jobs with good incomes that offer real hope and real comfort to our electors. And that should be our recipe. That should be our response to the tide of populism that is supposedly sweeping the world. So, my friends, let us work together, not ignore those voices, not condemn them, but understand and address their concerns. Britain and India are united by our values and in many ways by our approaches to the problems of the world. And it is by working together to improve our security that we will allow the freedom and the openness that will drive our long-term prosperity. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
So we will take 3 questions from the Raisina young fellows. Can I request Christian, Serena, and Paul to come to the mic? Secretary, would you like to take it one at a time or all 3 of them together?
I don't. One at a time.
One at a time. Christian.
Good afternoon, Minister. My name is Christiane, and as a German, I would be very interested in a statement on Brexit. So this morning, Jacques Audibert, the diplomatic advisor to President Hollande, told us that France will not accept better conditions outside for the UK outside the single market than if they had stayed in the single market. Given that fact, and after Prime Minister May yesterday announced that the UK will eventually leave the single market and the customs union, how will the UK continue to attract foreign business investment?
Well, thank you. I mean, first of all, just to explain the concepts, if I can, being a member of the single market means that you have to sign up to every piece of EU regulation and legislation. Just to give you one tiny example of where all this is going wrong, there was a case the other day of a guy who got knocked off a ladder in Slovenia and by a tractor and trailer, and he sued the owner of the trailer. And the case went all the way up to the European Court in Luxembourg, and Luxembourg decided that you had to insure such vehicles, any kind of moving vehicle, even if it was on private land. And the result is that we think, that our law seems to suggest, that we'll have to, old people will have to insure their mobility scooters and dodgem cars and heaven knows what, motorized rickshaws, on your own private land, quad bikes, whatever. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. In I don't know how long motorized rickshaws or mobility scooters or quad bikes have existed. I mean, decades. Nobody has ever seen the slightest need to force people to pay to insure them when they're just pottering around on their own in their own garden. But that is the result of this chap who's called Vnuk. Mr. Vnuk fell off a ladder in Slovenia, and bang, European law imposes this thing on the whole territory. That is a tiny, trivial example of the way the single market works. It is one of the things I think that is holding back growth and competitiveness in the European Union, and we want to come out of it, but that doesn't mean that we want to cease to have access to it. One of the disappointing facts is that in the last 25 years since the dawn of the single market, it's other countries, actually including India, that have done better at exporting into the single market than we in the UK have. So we have no terrors about this prospect. I think that if Monsieur Hollande wants to administer punishment beatings to anybody who chooses to escape, rather in the manner of some sort of World War II movie, then I don't think that is the way forward. And I think actually it's not in the interests of our friends and our partners. I just gave a very long speech, which you listened to with every sign of attention, I may say, in which I pointed out that we shouldn't have a world where we build up barriers to trade. We should be reaching out to each other. We should be working together. It seems absolutely incredible to me that in the 21st century, the European Union, member states of the European Union, should be seriously contemplating the reintroduction of tariffs or whatever to administer punishment to the UK. And don't forget that these things cut both ways. After all, the Germans, as is well known, export 1/5 of their entire motor manufacturing output to us. We're not only massive devourers of Jaguar Land Rovers, but also, of course, of BMWs and Mercedes. And you put a 10% tariff on 820,000 cars, 820,000 Mercs. That's a lot of money for the exchequer. So the swings and roundabouts is it's not the right way forward. We think we can do a great free trade deal for the benefit of both sides. The more trade, it cuts both ways. It's win-win for both. The more trade, the more jobs on both sides. That's the argument.
Can I request Serena to ask a question? Introduce yourself.
And off the back of Brexit, what is your actionable plan to keep institutions particularly in the country, but particularly in London? And linked to that, you've spoken quite extensively about India and the UK. So what is your vision for the India-UK partnership in the 21st century? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serena. And look, on the City of London and financial services, I was bragging a bit just now, but it happens to be true. London is the financial centre of this of our hemisphere. And by the way, it's the place to do a deal. I remember when Bharti Telecom wanted to buy an African telecommunications company, they did it through London. London is the place where you have the experts, you have the lawyers, you have the bankers. That's where you can raise the capital. It has the deepest pools of liquidity. And that's not just an asset for UK and India, it's an asset for the rest of the EU. It's the place where French construction companies go to raise the money they need to build a new nuclear reactor, or where Siemens goes to do a bond issue. So London is the natural financial capital. It has lots of advantages: time zone, language, a huge concentration of talent. Obviously, we will make the case to our friends and partners that it would be foolish again for the EU to seek to cut off its nose to spite its face, so to speak, by penalising the City of London, because after all, the jobs probably won't migrate to Paris or to Frankfurt, but to other Singapore or wherever it happens to be, Hong Kong, New York. It would be a net loss to Europe. I suppose they might go to Zurich or Zug or whatever, but we've been told that before. I remember being told several times that the City of London would disintegrate. I remember when I was Mayor of London, you remember we had the financial crash, we had the ERM business, we had all sorts of threats to, supposed threats to the dominance of London, and it never really happened. London just powered on, and in the years since the crash in 2008, actually Canary Wharf alone has grown to become bigger than the whole of the Frankfurt financial centre. So look, I don't want to be complacent. Of course, we've got to look to our laurels, we've got to remain competitive in the UK, but I believe we are competitive when we have natural advantages that will keep us competitive. On UK-India, I think the Prime Minister just had a very successful visit in November. Our Prime Minister, Theresa May, had a very successful visit, a great meeting with Prime Minister Modi. We've set up a joint working group to take things forward. Across the waterfront of issues, security, counterterrorism, intelligence sharing, all those things that I was discussing earlier on, defense cooperation, technology sharing. We want to do much, much more together. And then, of course, there's the whole free trade deal, which I've sketched out in detail today. You have our whiskey, we take your electric cars, I think was the gist of it. But we might have to elaborate it.
But we should not mix the car and the whiskey.
No.
Yeah.
Good point, thank you.
The final question from Tal.
Good afternoon, Mr. Foreign Secretary. A cultural question as we represent the young generation here. So one could argue that the Brexit does send a message to a young generation worldwide of disengagement. How exactly do you intend to use culture to overcome this, what one could argue could be quite a PR blow for a country like Britain, who has such a vast such a vast cultural image, such a vast cultural contribution to the world?
But thank you so much, Tal. But let me just remind you of the key statistic that 93% of the world does not live in the EU, including. I mean, that's true.
That's true.
Actually, it's more than that. It will be more than that shortly. 94%. It will be. And so, look, of course we're going to remain, it's vital to, because there are many European friends and colleagues here today. It's vital to understand, we love Europe. We are a European country. We could not leave Europe unless you towed us into the middle of the Atlantic and tried to sink the UK with naval guns, and even that wouldn't work. We are part of European culture and civilization, incontestably. That's what Britain is. And has, by the way, made a huge contribution to that culture and civilization. And we simply think that there is a great wide world out there. And we're going to keep sending our tourists in ever-growing numbers to Prague for stag parties and stuff, where they're greeted with great rapture, and all these. We make a huge contribution to the tourist industry of other European countries. We're there. We're embedded in the EU, and we will be. We will remain massive participants, as I said, at an intergovernmental level with our European friends and partners. But we also want to extend that reach, and that's one of the reasons why I think I can tell you, or maybe I can announce. I'm going to announce it, because you probably haven't heard it before. But 2017 is the UK-India Year of Culture, isn't it? It is. Thank you, Mr. High Commissioner, for starting awake at that point and nodding vigorously. It is the UK-India Year of Culture, and we want to promote. There's so much that we have in common. I was trying to explain in my faltering way earlier on. I genuinely think that if you look at the syncresis, the fusion between the UK and India, there's never been anything like it. There's never been India has a most amazingly powerful and probably the most overwhelming culture that anybody, if you come to India as a young person, I think many Brits are totally overwhelmed by India. We also have a fairly pungent and powerful culture of our own. Take those two things together, and you get some quite extraordinary flowerings of literature, film, music, you name it. I think I'm right in saying, I don't know whether this is true, but I think I've said it before, so I'll say it again. I seem to remember that the Bhangra beat was actually, it came from India. It then went to Hollywood. No, not Hollywood, it went to Southall. It went to Southall in London, and then they sort of twizzled it up a bit and made it more funky. Yeah, I think that's right. And then it came back to India and was even more popular in that incarnation. Is that conceivable?
That's true.
That's true, right, phew, okay, I got that right anyway. So that is an example, I think, of the cultural syncresis between our two countries. It's extraordinary to witness it, and we want to intensify it. Thank you very much for listening today. Thank you.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary, and I wish you a very successful travels to Southeast Asia, where you'll be heading from here.
Thank you.
And I hope we'll see you back at Raisina next year, and best of luck till then. Thank you so much.